Howdy folks, welcome back to Boonedockery. It's an absolutely dismal day outside today. Right now it's 49 degrees, which I believe is supposed to be the high. It's been raining all day. It's not a good day to be outside. So if I want to do any type of filming, I'm going to have to do it inside. But fortunately enough, I just happen to have a Bushcraft Laboratory, which comes in quite handy. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to do a test burn for solid fuels. It's part 3 in a series on solid fuels and solid fuel stoves, and by the time you're finished you're going to learn a little bit about that little critter called hexamine, and you'll probably get a very good understanding as to what the shortcomings and what the positive effects for those little fuel tabs are. Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to go over a list of the things you'll need to perform the test. The most important thing is you are performing the test in a very well ventilated area. And my Bushcraft Laboratory is very well ventilated. It's very drafty, so it's perfect to do in here. You're also going to need the folding camp stove you're going to be using with your solid fuel. You're going to need a box of the solid fuel tabs that you plan on using. I just chose Coughlin because that's what's readily available for me. If you are going to be using different solid fuels, you're going to want to perform this test on each one of them and keep track of the data you acquire from those tests, because not all manufacturers manufacture their solid fuels in the same way or use the same ingredients. They're different sizes. They have different burn rates, different temperatures. So you're going to want to understand each brand that you're using, so that way you maximize your knowledge and the stove maximizes its efficiency because you know how to use it. You're going to need to have an ignition source for the solid fuel tabs. You're going to need to have the cook pot you're going to be using with your stove. You're going to need to have cold tap water. And with it's raining outside, I probably could go to my eave spout, put this under the drain, fill it up, be nice and cold. You want it on the cool side. We really want to challenge our fuel tab to see what its potential is. And since we must consider safety, I have a fire extinguisher. I'm having open flames inside an enclosed space. And I just want to have it for safety. Probably would never need it, but it's here if I do. Let's set up the test and get started. For the most part, people usually refer to solid fuel as a generic term. It's like the Xerox machine. It's a photostatic copying machine, but people call it a Xerox machine even if it's not manufactured by Xerox. So a lot of people call solid fuel tabs Hexamethylenetetramine tabs, just a generic term. And another generic term is Hexi tabs. Hexi tabs. Well, you want to know what it's really called? Get this in close so you can see it. Hexamethylenetetramine. 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 Say that 5 times fast with marbles in your mouth. That's a mouthful all on its own. You don't need the marbles. I also was showing off my drawing abilities when I was doing my research on hexamethylenetetramine, and I found a chemical illustration for the formula. There's a reason why I did not take chemistry in high school. Well, that right there should pretty much fill your brain, and that's okay. Just push pause, take a break, let that soak in, let it soak in, let it soak in. And when you're ready, come back. Hopefully you don't have to take ibuprofen or anything to get rid of that headache. Just come back and push play. Okay, everyone should be good now because I've got some more information about hexamethylenetetramine. First of all, we all refer to these fuel tabs as hexamine. It isn't exactly true. Hexamine is an ingredient to hexamethylenetetramine, but it on its own is not the fuel tab. As a matter of fact, companies add a whole lot of things to hexamine to create solid fuel tabs. Some of them even use something called trioxane. If you were in the United States military, you know what trioxane is because that's what they used to issue us as a fuel tab. Wasn't very efficient. Didn't work real well. But hexamine, the original ingredient that goes into hexamethylenetetramine, was invented in 1859 by Alexander Boltrov. Now, that chemical was never intended to be a solid fuel. They used it for resin casting, they used it to bind different types of rubber, they used it as an ingredient, as a fireproof substance to separate things in early automotive engines, things like that. And they also used it as an antiseptic and, believe it or not, an antibiotic, primarily used to fight urinary tract infections. Now, in 1936, some smart cookie in his lab added a bunch of different ingredients to hexamine, and he created hexamethylenetetramine. And that smart cookie just happened to work for Esbit. That was the genesis moment of solid fuel tabs. And from that moment, it made its mark, and other people have tried to improve it. Other people have tried to duplicate it, but it has been prolific ever since that time. So I just wanted to bore you with a little bit of history about it, a little bit of information, because a lot of times we just pick it up, oh, hexamine, tetramine, burn, fire good. And we don't really think about it. I think about stuff like this, and I just thought you might too. Let's go ahead and get on to the test. Okay, before we go any further, I need to correct myself. It wasn't Alexander Boltrov, it was Alexander Butlerov that invented this in 1859. Okay, I corrected myself. No need for comments. The first thing we need to do for the test is we need to open our solid fuel stove to the maximum degree that it can be opened and still facilitate the pot we're going to be using. Now, if I sit her down like this, it may or may not be stable. You want to make certain that it's going to be stable. So I'm going to check this when I set it up. If it's not stable, I need to adjust it to the next position to where it will be stable. Stability is very important for this. You don't want your water spilling out in the forest when you want to try to boil water. You don't want your water spilling doing the test. If your base is wide enough to facilitate it being wide open, that's what you want to use, because we want to make this difficult for the fuel. We want to challenge it here. We want to make it difficult here, so that way when we go out in the forest and we use all the tricks we possibly can to make it more efficient, we know it's going to outperform what it's going to perform in this test. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. Did a test fit with my cook pot and my stove, and the results are inconclusive. But I'm feeling a little crazy today, feeling like living on the edge, and I'm just going to go for it. So I'm going to put my cook pot on top of my stove in its maximum open position. Call me crazy, but I'm going for it. Let's check it out. Okay, here we go. Fully open position. I'm going to put 1.5 cups water in my cook pot. It's 12 ounces. The reason I'm using that amount is because that's the amount I use most when I go to the woods. That's the amount that most of the Mountain House meals require, and that's what I use this for. Boiling water, reconstituting meals, boiling water, making coffee. So the maximum amount I would be boiling at any one time will be 1.5 cups. I'm going to go ahead and put a solid fuel tab right there where it goes, and I'm going to be using storm matches to ignite this thing with. I love these things. It's like the 4th of July every single time you light a fire. It even smells like fireworks. Just makes me happy. There's small pleasures in life. You just got to hold on to them. Now, if you notice, I do not have a lid for my cook pot. I do not want a lid on my cook pot because that's going to help that fuel out. I want to make things hard for the fuel. I want that fuel to prove itself to me. It's like it's an athlete. It's like, you know, the athlete's nothing unless it proves itself. Here we go. Oh, it's going to be so scary. There we go. Oh, look at that. That's balance. Definitely not perfect balance, but it's balance. Now, go ahead and adjust this. Turn around here. Yeah, that's right. While that is heating up and doing what it needs to do, I need to talk to you about a couple things with the hazards of hexamethylenetetramine. It creates harmful vapors. And in those vapors, there are gases of formaldehyde, ammonia, nitrogen oxide, and hydrogen cyanide. That's some scary stuff. So you definitely want to use a well-ventilated area when you're using this stuff. And don't get all, freaked out and stuff. Oh, cyanide, gonna die. Because you don't die. You don't. Okay? If anything, if you're using it in an inappropriate way, you're in an enclosed space, your eyes are going to burn, your nose is going to burn. It's not going to be good. Do not eat it. That's really bad. That's really bad. That's toxic bad. That's just, don't do it. Don't eat the tabs. And only burn these things in a well-ventilated area. Now, like I said, I did not put a lid on my cook pot. Now, that water that I have in there, I am not going to use that to make a Mountain House meal. I'm not going to use it to make coffee with. I'm not going to consume it. Anytime that I use solid fuel tabs to boil my water, I'm going to always make sure I have a lid on it. I never, ever store my hexamine or any other solid fuel types that have these ingredients in them with my food. I keep them separate. So just keep that in mind. It sounds scary, but it's just like any household cleaner, any household chemical that you use on a daily basis. If you're stupid with it, yeah, bad things are going to happen. If you're intelligent about it and you use it the way it's supposed to be used, you're in good shape. Now, we have steam rising. We have bubbles on the bottom. And all the observations we need to be doing right now should be focused on the water, and it should be focused on the fuel tab. Now, the fuel tab right now, I'll get you down here, let's take a look at it. Remember, I am not a trained professional. By looking at that fuel right there, it is not quite half. I'd say it's 3/4 of the mass that it was. So it's still got significant amount of energy to burn. You want to keep an eye on that, because when you get to less than half mass, then you're going to start running out of energy. The flame is not going to be as efficient. And by the time that fuel tab gets to 1/4 of its mass or less, then what you have is inefficiency. You might as well just blow it out because it's not going to do you any good. Okay, we're really getting some good steam now. Getting some bubbling come up from the bottom. And so the fuel tab is definitely doing its work, and we're making it work for it. I would say if the lid were on this, with the amount of steam that's coming off of there, it very easily may be to the boiling point right now. That water is very, very close to boiling. And we're almost at the half mass point of that fuel tab. The fuel tab has now burned to about 1/4 of its mass. So therefore, it's not going to be doing any good whatsoever. The water almost came to a boil. Almost. But almost doesn't count in this test. Let me tell you what we need to do next. A single fuel tab was unable to boil 12 ounces of water in the conditions I presented. Now what I need to do is extinguish the fuel tab, that little bit of an ember that's going now. I need to empty out the water, and I need to refill it, allow the stove to cool, and then I'm going to put 2 fuel tabs on the stove. And we will observe that to see if it will get it to boil. We'll go ahead and set that up. Okay, let's go ahead and try 2 tabs. Put my 1.5 cups of water in here. I have no doubt that it's going to come to a boil probably fairly quickly. My favorite part. Look at that. It's so pretty. All right. Now precariously balance my pot on there. And oh, it's amazing. I'm not going to pick up the camera again, but immediately in the bottom I'm starting to see activity, swirling, and maybe even a couple little bubbles forming on the very bottom of the cook pot. And I'm quite confident this is going to boil fairly rapidly. You can already see that there's steam coming out of it. So at this point, I could say, yes, I need 2 fuel tabs to boil 12 ounces of water. And that's what I need to know. Once you have determined what you need as far as your fuel tabs go, I think it's helpful to write this stuff down. I keep like a little Bushcraft journal. Whenever I try something, I go out with someone, they have a different trick, a different hack, a different way of doing something I think is interesting, I want to try it. I always write it down in here. But what you want to do is you want to write down the name of the brand, this is Coughlin, and the amount of water that you're going to be boiling and the number of tabs that it requires to get that amount of water to boil. And you just make a note of that. And you can get one of these little tablets. This is a Write in the Rain tablet that works real well. You can go in and you can categorize your pages. And this right here, I could categorize this as solid fuel stoves. And in that category, anything that I come up with, anything that I learn about solid fuel stoves, I can just write it down right there, and that way it's where I need it to be when I want to look for it again. And if I were to try other fuel tabs, test those, I'd want to do the same for that. There may be manufacturers out there that you may actually have to have 3 or 4 heat tabs to get them to boil the amount of water that you need. Whereas others, they may be sufficient to do the task in one. That way you know what to take with you when you get to the woods. It's just about at a boil. We'll bring it around here and let you see it. Yeah, I can hear it. And that's one thing you'll notice. The more you use any type of stove while you're camping, is that you can listen to the water even when the lid is on it, and you can hear the buildup to a boil, and then you'll hear the immediate change once it comes to a boil. It's a little thing I noticed all the years I've been doing this, is you listen to it and it will let you know when it's boiling. And oh yeah, we're not even at 3/4 of the fuel tab mass, and I'd call that boiling. It's not at the rolling boil yet. And as soon as it comes to rolling boil, you notice that sound will change. Okay, the sound's starting to change, and it is coming to a rolling boil now. So, with not quite 1/2 of 2 fuel tabs, I was able to get that to come to a rolling boil in a fairly short amount of time. I've made my notations in my journal, and now I have to use this information. The next time I go to the woods and I go camping, I need to plan how many times I need to boil water. If I have a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner Mountain House meal, and they all three require 1.5 cups of water, then I know I need to take at least 6 tablets with me. If that's 2 days, that's a minimum of 12. If I do another test at 1 cup, and that's going to be my measurement for a cup of coffee, I'll need to do a separate test. So that way I know how many tabs I need to boil that amount of water. Now in this planning, when I plan out my meals, I have a pretty good idea of how many times I'm going to be boiling water, and I have that amount of fuel tabs. I have everything that I need. That's the minimum. I always take anywhere between 10 to 25% more tablets than I absolutely need, just in case. Just in case. There's always situations that may come up to where, okay, you know, I'm feeling tired, I want another cup of coffee. That way you'll have the fuel tabs available for you in order to use them. There are hacks, which, you know, I will talk about in the future, that you can do with these folding stoves for alcohol stoves, twigs, things like that. However, for using the solid fuel tabs, this is the method that I use to ensure that I have the amount of fuel that I need for an outing. If you've used solid fuel tabs in the past, you're aware of the odor. If you've not used solid fuel tabs in the past, let me caution you, they stink. Not only do they stink, but if you were to put these things in your backpack, and a outside pocket in your backpack, and a pouch in your backpack, within a very short period of time, that odor is going to saturate whatever fabric is around it, and that will smell that way for a long time. Sometimes you have to wash it a couple different times to get that odor out of there. So in order to, you know, defeat that, I always put my solid fuel tabs in a waterproof container. A Ziploc bag works just fine. I use Ziploc freezer bags. If you plan on storing your solid fuel tabs inside your folding stove, put your stove in an airtight bag. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when it comes to your kit, if you want to smell like a litter box, fine, disregard. But if you don't want your kit smelling like cat urine, go ahead and use a watertight container like a Ziploc bag. One last tip I'd like to share with you is for cleanup. The solid fuel tabs are supposed to burn very clean compared to other fuels. Some produce more soot than others. All of them emit those chemicals that are trapped in them while they're burning onto the outside of your cook pots. I just use wet wipes. They can be baby wipes, they can be, let's see, this is wet ones, anything like that at all. And what you want to do is just give the outside of your cook pot a wipe down. If they do produce a lot of soot, then you're basically preventing all that soot from getting all over the inside of your kit. If by any chance it's a low amount of soot, it doesn't matter. You're wiping off all those harmful chemicals. And wipe her down real good, and then you put it back away. And you can do the same thing to your stove. You can clean your stove in the same way. Likelihood of your stove using something other than solid fuel tabs is going to be less. Your cook pots, you use them for everything. Gas, isobutane, your twig stoves, campfire, what have you. But just get in the habit of cleaning these things off as you use them, and you have less mess in your pack, and you have less potential of contaminating anything with those harmful chemicals. Hopefully you found some of the information I presented today helpful. I hope I've increased your knowledge and understanding of solid fuels and solid fuel stoves, and I hope that the burn test for the solid fuel tabs helped you to be able to determine exactly how much fuel you'll be able to take into the woods to be able to satisfy all of your water boiling needs. As always, I really appreciate you watching, and if you liked it, go ahead and give me the thumbs up. If you didn't, click the thumbs down. But if you do that, please go ahead and put a comment in as to why. If you like what you're seeing, click the subscribe button. If you want to stay up to date on what I'm doing, go ahead and click that notifications bell. Until next time, thanks for watching.